Okay, good morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. We're on the bottom of Samach Zayin Beis, the last word on Samach Zayin Beis. If you're following in the English, I think it's just also the last word on Samach Zayin Beis. So the last thing we discussed, we had tried to prove, we made the assumption and concluded that someone who has a carry, someone who has a seminal emission, is going to be just as tamei as a zav in terms of machanosam, in terms of the camps, meaning that they have to not only leave the machane shechina, they also have to leave the machane levia, just like a zav who also cannot be in the middle camp, in the center camp, the holiest, not in the camp of the Levim, the next one, but he's in the third camp. Okay, so however, the Gemara tried challenging this from a Mishnah, where the Mishnah said a Balkari is like someone who touches a sheretz. Now we know someone who touches a sheretz only has to leave the Machane Shechina, is allowed to be in the Machane Levia. So we said, oh look, it's telling you that Balkari also has the same status and is able to stay in the Machane Levia. The Gemara said, no, it's coming to teach you something else, but it's not teaching me something about the camps. Okay, so that was the last part of the last discussion, but the bottom line is what came out is that Mishnah, we had to say, in order to keep our position consistent, it's to say that although the Mishnah there compared someone who had a seminal emission to someone who touched a sheretz, the point of that comparison was not about which camp they're able to stay in, but rather was about a different halacha. However, the Gemara is going to challenge this assumption from the following. Mesve, the Mishnah continues and says, Bo'al nida kitmei mes, that someone who has intimacy with a nida is like someone who's contaminated with corpse tuma. Okay, so lamai, regarding what? In what way are they the same? Ilam and the tumasam, if you want to say it's in terms of the fact that they are tamei for 7 days, just like it's a person who has is intimate with a nida is tamei for 7 days, just like someone who touches a corpse. That's what's coming to teach me. By both of them it says explicitly they're tamei for 7 days. You don't need the Mishnah. That would make no sense. The Mishnah to say, oh, learn from tamei mes. It says explicitly in the Torah about both of them. So that can't be what's coming to teach me. Allow machanosam. So rather, what's coming to teach me is that just like someone who's contaminated by the corpse, by a corpse, has to leave the machane shechina, so too someone who cohabits with the nida has to leave the machane shechina. But the point is, the fact that the second part of the Mishnah is going to teach me a halacha regarding which camp they're allowed to be in. That means the first clause is also teaching me about the camps, and therefore going back to how we started today, and when it said that someone who had a carry, someone who had a seminal emission is like someone who touched a sheretz, it's not coming to teach me. It's coming to teach. It is coming. If it's going to be consistent, coming to teach me that they have the same halacha regarding the camps, which would undermine what we've been trying to establish, that a balkari is the same as a zav. So Gemara says no. Midi area hakadisa. No, different lines in the Mishnah, each one according to their own thing. In other words, the first line in the Mishnah, which said a balkari is like someone who touched a sheretz, that someone who had a seminal emission is like someone who touched this rodent. That is coming to teach me that they both could be tamei, even if it happened against their will, but onus. Okay, but the next line, which said that a nida is like a bol nida, someone who has intimacy with a nida is like someone who is a touched corpse toma, that's going to teach me halacha about the camps. In other words, each line could be coming to teach me a halacha about something else. Okay, now we're going to challenge from the following brayso. Mezve, mitzora chamor mizav. It's a Mishnah Bryce is like this: 68-1 top, second column. Mitzora chamor mizav, it says that a mitzora is more stringent than a zav. Vizav chamor tmei mes, and in some ways a zav, and the law of a zav is more stringent. Okay, so again, mitzora is more chamor than zav. Okay, mitzora is at the top, more chamor than zav. Vizav chamor tmei mes, and a zav is more stringent than someone who touches a corpse. Okay, yatsa balkari, excluded is this person who has seminal emission. Shetmei mes chamor menu, that someone who has corpse toma, okay, is more stringent. Okay, so what does that last line mean? Someone excluded is someone who had a seminal emission, compared to this person who is contaminated with corpse toma. Ma yatsa, what does this mean that they're excluded? Lav yatsa miklal zav. Does this not mean that the someone who is who had a seminal emission is not included in the category? Yatsa means they're out of the category of a zav. Uva lechlal tmei mes. They're excluded from its tmei mes. In other words, even though you would have thought someone had a seminal emission, and in terms of it's similar to that of a zav, therefore it's part of the category. Yatsa is telling you no, they're not the same as someone who has someone zav, and rather they're like a tmei mes. Dahat tmei mes chamor menu. And what's the Mishnah Bryce is saying? It's saying because since a tmei mes is in many ways more stringent than someone who had a seminal emission in terms of the length of tuma. Someone who has a tmei mes is tamei for 7 days. Someone who has a seminal emission is only tamei for that day. And nonetheless, it's going to be permitted to enter the Levi camp, the middle camp. So basically, what this Bryce would be teaching me is the following. I'll just say it in my own words because it's a little bit of a hard read. And basically, the Bryce would be saying that you have zav mitzora more chamer than zav more chamer than tmei mes, and balkari is excluded from their category. What does this mean? So what it means is that balkari is not included in zav, but rather it's included in tmei mes. And the Bryce is saying, why isn't it included in the laws of Tamei Meis? Because Tamei Meis is more machmir, more chamor than someone had a seminal emission, because Tamei Meis is 7 days, seminal emission is 1 day, and therefore it should be included in that category. So the Gemara says lo. And therefore, what would it come teach me? It would come teach me that someone has a seminal emission is only going to leave the machna shchina, but is able to be in the machna levia, not like we're trying to establish. So the Gemara says no. There's another way to read this Bryce. So lo yatzim machna Tamei Meis. What it means is to exclude the Balkari, the person in a seminal emission, excluded from the category of Tamei Meis. V'nichnas machna zav, and instead include it in the category of someone who's a zav. And even though, what the Bryce is coming to say is actually the opposite, saying even though a person who's contaminated with corpse tuma is in some ways more stringent than a person who had a seminal emission, because someone who's a Tamei Meis is going to be tummy for 7 days. So when a seminal emission is only tummy 1 day, umut machna levia, and the Tamei Meis is still allowed to be in the camp of the Leviim. But the point of the Bryce is to say that no, exclude, even though you would have had a strong havamina, to assume that a seminal emission is going to be in the same category as Tamei Meis, and there because Tamei Meis is more machmir than seminal emission, and therefore the person who has seminal emission should be allowed to be in the machna levia. Don't say that, because rather, we treat a seminal emission like the thing which is similar to it, and that is a zav. They both become tamei in a similar fashion, and therefore we treat it in the same fashion. And what the Bryce is ultimately telling me is that the person who has a seminal emission has to leave the machna levia as well. Okay, 68a2. Tana kamei Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi. Okay, we're trying to bring a support to this position now. We've finished asking questions. We're going to try to bring support to say that someone who had a seminal emission is going to only have to leave. Someone who has a seminal emission is going to have to leave the machna shchina and the machna levia. How do we learn? The pasuk says, "V'yatza el michutz machna." A person who had a seminal emission has to go out of the camp. Zo machna shchina. So it says has to leave the camp. That refers to the center camp, the camp of Shechina, okay? And then it says, Lo yavo tocha machana, don't go into the camp, zo machna levia. It refers to the machna levia. Mikal balkari sheyatze chutz shtei machanas. Where we see that someone has a seminal emission leaves the 2 camps, okay? Both the middle camp, the machna Shechina, and the machna levia, it supports the position we've been trying to establish all along. However, the Gemara has an issue with this. Amrle, Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi takes issue. He says, Kati lo yalte apikte. He says, you haven't yet brought the tummy into the Levi camp, and you're already taking him out. Lishna I'll explain what this means in a moment. Lishna alternatively, you have not yet taken this tummy out of the Levi camp, and you're already bringing him in. So what this means is as follows. Let's look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, the person on the mission has to leave the camp. Which camp are we saying? We're saying leave the machna Shechina and go into the next camp, which is the machna Levia, the camp number 2. And then it says, Lo yavel toch machna, he can't go into it. So what do you mean? So not go into it, but he's in the machna levia. So what should it be referring to? It should, by saying that, it sounds like it should be referring to saying that he can't go into the machna Shechina, and saying, but he's allowed to stay in the machna levia, right? That's where Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi is asking. He's saying the psukim over here, he's not. It doesn't say leave this camp and then leave that camp. It says leave this camp and don't go into the camp. Well, I just left this camp. I'm now in the machna levia, and says don't go in. Don't go into what? I'm in the machna levia. So it can't be telling me to leave the machna levia because I'm there right now because I just left the machna shechina. So it seems to be saying that I just can't go into the machna shechina, and this seems to be contrary to what we're trying to establish. The Gemara says Ela Ema. So Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi concludes. Way to read the Bryce is like this. Michutz l'machana is a machna levia. It's talking about a person who's in the machana levia, who's in the Levi camp, and it's saying go out beyond the camp, meaning leave the Levi camp. And then lo yavo tocha machana is a machana shchina. It's saying and don't go into the camp means don't go into the machana shchina. So basically, it is telling me to leave both camps, leave the machana levia, and then says don't go into the camp is not referring to the camp that I just left, rather the machana levia of shchina, and it's coming to teach me that I can't be in both those camps. However, maskal ravina ema idvi idil machana shchina. But you could still say that no, all it's telling you is you can't leave. You have to leave the machna levia. Have to leave the machna shechina, and there's 2 isurim, right? The labra labas to say, and come and teach me one prohibition that you must leave, okay? You must go out of the camp, okay? And it's saying, and don't go in. So it's come and teach me that I'm going to be in violation of 2 things if I go into the machna shechina. It says the Gemara, im kain, if that's so, limakrav yatz b'chutz machana lo yavo el toch. It should say go out of it and don't go in. Why does it say lo yavo el toch hamachaneh? Why does it say you should not go back into the camp? It says camp twice. So shma mina litin lo machna cheres. The fact that it says bottom line, this is the way we're learning it. They say that the fact that it says he shall leave the camp and he cannot enter the camp, but the fact that it says camp twice teaching me he has to leave 2 camps, meaning he leaves the machna shechina and he leaves the machna levia. And we have now established what we've been trying to prove all along, that a person at a seminal emission cannot be not only in the machna shechina, the place where the base Mikdash is, but the Mishkan is, but rather also the machna levia. Okay, says the Gemara further, umichui kravav. So we're talking about in the Mishnah way back when we're talking about what was allowed to be done on Shabbos? If Erev Pesach and Shabbos coincide, what could be done on Erev Shabbos? So the Gemara says michui krava, the michui of its intestines. My michui krava. What does it mean? The michui of its intestines. Rav Huna Amar shemenakvim b'sakin. It means that you perforate the intestines with a knife and you allow the liquefied waste to flow from it. Okay, so michui. From the terminology of basically making a puncture. Okay, that's what the word means. Okay, so. Okay, sorry, it's not meaning a puncture, but rather means dissolution, which means like basically creating like a liquid to flow through. That's what I'm trying to think of like a similar terminology, but basically it's like almost like to crush something which is liquefied, and so you puncture the intestines, and the liquid that's in the intestines pours forth. That's Rav Huna's interpretation. It does not refer to puncturing, but rather refers to the removal of the putrid slime that's in the intestines. And the only way you get that is the knife. In other words, the way you get the waste out of the animal is like this: you puncture the intestines. Okay, that's step number one, and that's what Rav Huna says that's what we're allowed to do on Shabbos. Can't do anything more. Chia bar Rav says no. In addition to doing that, we're allowed to do is scrape off the waste that sticks to the walls of the intestines. It's a putrid, disgusting stuff. That's what you're allowed to do on Shabbos. You're allowed to do that as well. Okay, 68A3. Amar Rabbi Lazar. My time at the Chia bar Rav. What's the etymological source for Chia bar Rav, who says it's referring to slime and grime and all disgusting stuff? Tichsiv, pasuk says Nishaya v'charvos mechem garim yochilu, and the ruined homes, the fat ones, sojourners will consume. Okay, so the pasuk used the word mechem from michoy. That's the term we've been using in the Mishnah. It says you're allowed to michoy. So my mashma, how do you see from here? It refers to the waste. So can we talk about Yosef? Yosef interprets the pasuk to mean the meaning of the pasuk is that the possessions, the ruined homes, the fat ones, are a reference to the Rishaim, the ruins, the possessions of the wicked ones, and that's from the word mechim. Okay, that's what word mechim means. The righteous will inherit. What the pasuk is ultimately teaching me is that the Rishaim who have all these possessions now, in the future, in the Messianic era, etc., the tzaddikim are going to take their possessions. But it refers to the wicked as mechim. So we see that mechim doesn't mean this like liquefying, but rather it's a source to say that it means like the disgusting stuff that's sitting on the walls of the intestines. That's what the word mechem means, and that's what the Mishnah was referring to. Chia bar Rav is saying that you're allowed to scrape off the disgusting waste, the slime and grime from the walls. Okay, uverau chavasim kidavram. Now we mentioned this pasuk where it continues and describes the beginning of the pasuk. At the beginning of the pasuk says, "And sheep shall graze kidavram." Okay, Amar Menashe bar Yomi Amar Rav Kamadubar bam. Okay, what does it mean? Kid davram, that the sheep over here is reference to Klal Yisrael. They are going to graze, they're going to prosper. Kid davram. What does it mean, kid davram? From the words kimidubar bam, as it was said about them. Ask the Gemara, my kidubar bam. What was said about them? There's a lot of things said about the Jewish people. What are you referring to? Amar Baya v'charvos mechem gar mechelu. The last part of that pasuk, which says, and the ruined homes, the fat ones, sojourners will consume, is referring to the Jewish people, the righteous, the Jewish people. They're going to go ahead and take the homes, the possessions of the Rishaim. That's what the kid davram, as was said about them. Amar le Rava bishlam iksiv charvos kidika amras. If Hannah just said the end of the pasuk said charvos and just continued said the ruined homes, then you'd say, okay, the promise is, and what's this will happen to the Jewish people as it's promised. This is the promise, okay? But it doesn't say that. The fact is, and the ruined homes implies there's a second thing that's happening over here. So there's really two things going on. There's one is v'charvos, which is that the Jewish people inherit the possessions of the wicked people. But the first thing, kid davram, as it was said, it seems to refer to something else. What is that something else? Al-Marava, 6883. Kidei Rav Chananel Amarav, the Amar of Chananel Amarav, Asidin Sdikim Shiyichayu as a Mason. That, this is a fascinating Gemara. We always think of Tchias Mason like all of a sudden it's going to happen. It's going to be Tchias Mason. But the Gemara over here is telling us that it's not like, the way it's going to happen is the righteous, that tzaddikim are going to be the conduits. They're going to be the ones who will affect Tchias Mason. They're going to cause Tchias Mason. Okay? How do we know that? Ksiv hacharuch avasim kidavram. This pasuk says the sheep shall graze as is stated of them. Okay, and again, ambiguous. What does it mean? It's stated of them. And then Ksiv hasam, it says in Micha, yiru vashan v'gila kimei olam. Okay, so that it also used the word yiru, which means to graze, and they will graze in Bashan and Gilad as in days of old. So what is that referring to? So Bashan, who is Bashan? In Bashan, Bashan is a place that's in the Transjordan, but it's not a reference to the place. Rather, Bashan is Elisha Bamana Bashan, it's a reference to Elisha Navi, who came from Bashan. Ya'aneh v'Shafat beBashan. So we know that Yaneh and Shaphat come from Bashan, and Uchsib Po Elisha ben Shaphat Asher Yatzek Ma'im Lidei Eliyahu refers to Elisha being the son of Shaphat. So we see that Elisha comes from Bashan, and that's who it's a reference to. Gilad Gilad ze Eliyahu. We know Shnemar v'yomer Eliyahu v'tishbi mitoshave Gilad, right? We know Eliyahu HaGiladi. We know that Eliyahu is from Gilad. So in as much as Elisha and Eliyahu caused Tchias HaMesim in their lifetime, right, they both brought a person back, so too, in the future, the tzaddikim like Elisha and Eliyahu will be the ones who cause Tchias HaMesim, and that's what Kid Davram is a reference to. As was spoken to them, it's a reference as Pasuk Micha, which is juxtaposed to the Gzer Shava. They have the same word, Uru'u, and teaching me that in Tchias HaMesim, it's not just going to happen by Hashem, cause going to happen. It's going to happen through the tzaddikim. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rav Yonasan, Asim tzaddikim sheyai chayim mesim. We have another teaching from a different source that the righteous are the ones who are going to cause the resurrection of the dead. Shnemar od yeshvus kinim kinis barchavus Yerushalayim ish mishanto biyadam mirov yamim. Pasuk says, famous pasuk, set up Sukkim in Zechariah. It says that they'll sit old men and old women in the streets of Yerushalayim, each man his staff in his hand because of his great age. So it talks about the old man with his staff. So what's that all about? It says about Elisha when he resurrected the child. It says, you should place my staff upon the face of the boy. So you see that the staff is that causes it. So you see the juxtaposition between the two psukim teaches me that in the future, in the psukim of Odisham bar Yehuda, it talks about the old people. It says that they're going to have the staff in their hand. What that is an allusion to is the Tchias HaMesim is going to happen through the staffs in the tzaddikim's hands. Okay, Ula Rami, Ula brings a contradiction regarding Tchias HaMesim. Ksib bila hamavet lanetzach. Right, we hear this pasuk. We say this pasuk usually at the end of a funeral, at the end of a hesped, a eulogy. It says that he will conceal death forever. Okay, meaning, right, that means there'll be no more death. Another pasuk says, another pasuk in regards to Tchias HaMesim, both pasukim in Yeshaya, it says, in regards to the times of Mashiach, seemingly, it says that the youth, they'll die 100 years old. Okay, so lokasha, no contradiction. Kan be Israel, kan be ovdei kochavim. There is going to be no death for the Jewish people, but there will be death, eventual death, meaning even though they'll live very, very long lives, for non-Jews. Ovdei kochavim my bohas. And where it says, what are these non-Jews doing there? They are going to stand and tend our flocks, and foreigners will be your plowmen and your vine dressers. Okay, so basically these are ovdei kocham. These are actually idolaters, and they will live during this time, but their function will be to serve the Jewish people. Okay, Rav Chisda has a contradiction. It says the moon will be embarrassed and the sun will be ashamed. Implies that in the future both these luminaries will not be shining. It says another pasuk says, "V'haya or halvana." It says the light of the moon will be like the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be 49 times brighter than the light of the 7 days. Okay, so it seems like the light's going to be brighter. So which one is it in the future? Are we going to have no moon and no sun, or are we going to have a moon and sun which are so much brighter? So lokash, no contradiction. Difference is it in the world to come? In the world to come, there's not going to be any need for any lights, because in the world to come, you just don't need it. The most Mashiach in the times of Messianic era, they're going to then they're going to be more intense. In the Messianic era, they're going to have this brilliant light, but in the Olam Haba, we don't need their light at all, and therefore there will be no sun and moon. Okay, so we have an opinion of Shmuel, which is something that Rambam codifies, and that is, he says there is no difference between this world and the Messianic era, okay, except for the fact that we will no longer be enslaved or subjugated to foreign entities. We'll be able to have our own independence. That is the only difference, but the world will be as natural as it is right now. You will not be able to tell the difference just by looking outside. There will be nothing supernatural. So according to Shmuel, which is a legitimate view, again, taken by the Rambam, and there's a view adopted by the rationalists, and that is that in Mashiach, you're going to have the Beis Hamikdash, you're going to have the Jewish people living completely independently, but you will not have any differences in nature. So what is this? How do you understand this pasuk which says the sun's going to be so much brighter? He says, no, they're both not for the Messianic era, but they are for the world to come. Remember, there are four. There's Olam Hazeh, the world as we know it. That's the one we're in right now. There's Olam Hashamos, where when we die, our soul goes to the realm of souls, sometimes to Gan Eden, sometimes to Gehenna, and then there is the Messianic era, and then there's something called Olam Haba, which takes place after that. So Shmuel would say, in Olam Haba, that's what we're referring to. Lokasha, both are referring to Olam Haba. Lokasha, no contradiction. Kam machana shchina, kam machana tzdikim. Okay, a little cryptic, but basically saying there's two realms. There's the place of the machana shchina, where the shchina is. There you don't need any other lights because the shchina is so bright. And whereas in the camp of the righteous, it seems like, and it's kind of full circle. It seems like although when we're only in the midbar, do we have these three camps? We have the shchina in the middle, or the Mishkan. You had the Levium around, and then you had everyone else. It seems like in the times of Olam Haba, we will also have those different realms. You'll have at the center, you'll have the machana shchina, and there you don't need any lights because the Shekhinah is so bright. Then you have the Machanat Tzadikim, you have the camp of the righteous. There you will need light, and it will be a very bright light. Rav brings a contradiction. Pasuk in Sefer Devarim says, "I put to death and I make live. I wound and I will heal." If Hashem could bring people to life, of course He's going to heal. So why does the pasuk have to say this? It says, "I'm going to bring you to life." then of course I'm going to heal you. So El Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, this is where the way to read this psukim. Amashni memes and mechayek mosh v'chatzi v'niyarpa. In as much as you believe that I Hashem have the ability to heal you, so wait, how do I do that? Hashem. And Hashem creates the ability for there to be healing. So too Hashem has the ability to bring, and as much as when you see someone healing, what you should think to yourself, and this is the practical takeaway, when you see someone getting healed, you say to yourself, wow, it shows us that Hashem has the ability to go ahead and be Mechayim Mesim as well. Tanar Rabbanan, another brisa about this pasuk. You would say, Ani amis, I put to death, and I live, and I make live. So one person Hashem caused to die, one person Hashem brings to life, two different people. Tamalomar machasti v'ani arpar. No, it's talking about the same person. How do we see that from the end of the pasuk? The pasuk says, "Ma machasti, I wounded and I will heal." So ma makor fu ke'echad, just as a person gets wounded and healed, that's referring to one person. So too, when a pasuk says, I'm going to put to death and bring to life, it refers to a single person, meaning that Tchias HaMesim is in the Torah. This is a pasuk which says explicitly, Ani amis v'achayeh. Hashem is saying, I will bring people back to life. So we see Tchias HaMesim is said explicitly in the Torah. Another way of interpreting this pasuk, fascinating brisa says that when a person, that first Hashem is going to bring back to life, and then He's going to heal. Meaning, a person may have passed away with some illness, some deficiency, some some blemish, whatever it's going to be. Hashem is going to bring that person to life first, and then cause them to be healed. They're not going to come back, in their pristine state, but rather they're going to come back the same way they left, and then Hashem is going to heal them. And that's the way to read the pasuk. I will bring back to life, and then I will heal. Have a wonderful day.